Good morning, friends. Thanks for joining this morning here on Journey Home Meditation. This is the morning sit. I am Michael, and I'm going to be here today just to share a little bit of contemplations on some things that I think about, that maybe you think about sometimes as well. And I'm happy to be here doing this today. It is that Tuesday in November. It is election day here in the United States of America. So if this is where you're listening from, then you are well aware of the at risk of sounding like a conspiracy theorist, the intentional environment of anxiety. and I don't know if it requires any sort of dark room conspiracy to have an intentional environment of anxiety. I think it simply requires an addiction to knowing the answer. An addiction to controlling the outcomes, and an addiction to fortifying ourselves as separate from another. I think that these things are the basic elements that we come up to when we are talking about the ways that we are conforming to the standard modes of operation for our culture today. And when I say our culture, I mean the West. I mean particularly, American culture. And I'm not talking about our particular cultures of our families or the cultures of our smaller subsects of communities. There are definitely things that we enculturate, right? Things that we develop and work on smaller levels, smaller scales, that are sometimes in response to mass society culture, sometimes as a reaction to mass culture, and sometimes as a rebellion against mass culture. So there are subcultural ways of relating. There are multi-generational cultures that have developed over multiple generations, not just one, two, or three, but stretching way back, where we have developed ways to form sort of secret communications within the culture, right? And this is done for safety. This is done for to relate. There's all sorts of reasons that subcultures pop up. But when I'm speaking to the culture, the greater culture of the West, I'm speaking towards the one that sort of sets the tone and the rules for how we as a society function. And I'm tempted to say how we function or not, but even dysfunction is still the ways that we are functioning. So we enter into these relationships, and I think that we have formed an addictive personality as a collective around anxiety. And I don't think that we've necessarily done this because we enjoy anxiety. I think that we've done this because this level of extreme tension is much easier to focus our time and our energy on than it is to sit in stillness and be subtle. It takes a level of bravery, a level of courage, and it takes a lot of safety to be able to sit with your own pain and discomfort. And that safety that's required to do that has to be multi-tiered, right? You have to be able to find that safety within yourself, but it's also important that we remember that not everyone can find that safety outside of their body in our culture. There are people who their lives are very unsafe. And I think it's important for anybody who is maintaining or even entering into a practice of mindfulness and a meditative practice to remember that we we can only heal with safety. We can only begin to blossom with safety, and we can only begin to really make deep connections to ourself and one another in safety. Otherwise, uh, our natural state when we are unsafe is to be defensive. And when we forget that safety is not something that exists in our current day and culture for everyone, we can start to assume that people are making choices based upon the same level of regard and safety that you may have in this moment. And we can also assume that some of the choices that we are making are coming from that place of relative safety because we have felt it in the past. But if you feel it with mindfulness comes the ability to not, it's not about fighting what you're feeling. It can't be. It has to be about understanding what you're feeling. And understanding and fighting are two different things. I can't understand you when I am contradicting you. I can't understand you when I am speaking to you and not listening and hearing you, right? Um, and this is true on an external level, on that plane of existence where we are others, we're talking to others, interacting with others. But it's also true on that soul level of existence where we are internally confronting our own soul, our own spirit, and putting that up against our thoughts when our mind and our brain are working at odds, when our body and our mind are not congruent with one another, uh, we have struggle. So, my thoughts today on this election day is really one of trying to be understanding of my own body's tensions, fears, anxieties, anger, all of these expressions of something deeper. See, each of my emotions, I think, may be an expression, but I don't know that. I don't know that. I don't know that each of my emotions are simply a gesture being brought forth by something deeper, but I think that and I feel that. So I work with that. I work with that as being my functional truth right now. Right? And if I'm functioning with that, I want to make sure to leave room in my practice for not knowing. And this is where it gets really difficult. This is where the practice of meditative practices, the practices of mindfulness, the practices of awareness, um, can start to feel really triggering for somebody who has PTSD. It's difficult for me to not know. That is a scary place for me to be sometimes because I have learned, I've convinced myself that not knowing equals not being prepared. Not being prepared equals being exposed to predation. And being exposed to predation equals being a victim in my experience, right? This is the story that I've practiced for a long time. Even subconsciously, it wasn't like something I could name or talk about or pick out specific things to share with you. I couldn't give you specific examples of that story playing out, that narrative coming into my life, but I can tell you, looking now at the way that I feel sometimes and the way that I'm behaving towards others, when I can step back into not knowing, then I can see clearly that what I'm doing is trying so hard to know how you're feeling, or trying so hard to know who is my enemy and who is my friend, trying so hard to know who is separate from me, trying so hard to know who includes me or who excludes me. And in trying to know all of that, I'm insisting on all of that being true. I'm insisting on there being an enemy. And I'm not I'm not saying we don't have people who want to harm us. I see that. I see that every day. I see people that want to harm others. I see people that want to harm me. I see people that want to harm innocent people. It's true. But when I start to go into that place of needing to know who is who all of the time, and then that is when I start to ascribe to groups of people or to myself a separation and an otherness. And that causes anxiety for me. And that causes fear and it causes a response towards violence. Now, it's not that I'm going to wake up and go and start harming people that I think may harm me, but there is a level of violence already being played out in my story, right? So the practice that I am practicing requires me, it requires of me to sit and observe. And that takes a level of bravery within my own experience. I have to find some bravery in myself to sit with not knowing. I have to find some courage in myself to love without fear. And that means loving myself, and that means loving another, and that means witnessing the things that I'm doing and understanding you're you're doing your best. The joke that you made, maybe it was inappropriate. You can apologize. But you have to first understand what it is you're feeling, you're experiencing inside to be able to understand why you're motivated to do what you do. And when you can start on that path, you can start letting go of your insistence to know why somebody else is doing what they're doing and just hold within you that they are doing the best they can. And that's really difficult when someone's holding the gun. It's really difficult when someone's, waving the flag. And it's really difficult when someone's intentions that they're expressing are to cause harm to you and your loved ones. That's really difficult. But I think that being able to release myself of knowing the outcome is giving me an opportunity to be with what is in this moment, to generate some joy, to generate some use for my anger, to allow my anger to be the thing that motivates me towards healing, to allow my anger to push me towards justice, not punishment, to allow my anger to bring me into a place of insisting upon a level of togetherness, insisting upon it, saying, we will not walk away from this without having our seats at the table and sharing and hearing our voices. And that may not happen today. And it may not happen quickly, but it's something that's worth maintaining and standing upon. And that has to begin with I don't know. That has to start there. And today, of all days, not knowing is the crux of our anxiety, our fear, our rage, our separation. Um, but there's something in me that tells me that it whatever it is that I'm being motivated to do from inside, my internal motivations, I need to sit with what I'm feeling, accept what is real, and let go of anything that's pushing me towards anything but love and peace. That's where I'm at. Maybe that's not where you're at, and that's okay. I'm just sharing where I am in this moment. It's not that where I am is better than where you are. It's just a level of honesty that I have to come to with myself. And I don't know if all of these words that I'm using have actually been able to express the things that I'm feeling. And I don't know if the words that I'm using are able to bring light into the darker places inside of my body. But I know that expressing them is a first step towards seeing them for what they are. And maybe I've said something wrong, and that's okay. Maybe I've made a misstep in my calculations and understandings, and that's okay. But having a practice of learning about my motivations is helping me to understand that I too act out of fear, that I too run from anxiety, that I too avoid discomfort, that I too fear suffering. And that's all I need to know today. That's all I need to know. I have the capacity for those things. And if I have the capacity to avoid my suffering and the capacity to avoid my anxiety and the capacity to reject my fear and all of these things, then I have the capacity to do just about anything to anyone in the world if it means that I'm doing it to avoid my suffering. And that's a pretty terrifying realization. But if we can begin there, then we also know that we have the capacity to sit with our fear just a little bit longer until it starts to shift and it starts to calm and it starts to relax and it starts to let loose its death grip and become vulnerability. So I'm going to end with a blessing by John O'Donohue. John O'Donohue is an Irish poet who became an ancestor in 2008. And he wrote a series of blessings. And this one is called Benacht. It's a Irish Gaelic word for blessing. And this was written for his mother, Josie. On the day when the weight deadens on your shoulders and you stumble, may the clay dance to balance you. And when your eyes freeze behind the gray window and the ghost of loss gets into you, may a flock of colors, indigo, red, green, and azure blue, come to awaken you in a meadow of delight. When the canvas frays in the currach of thought and a stain of ocean blackens beneath you, may there come across the waters a path of yellow moonlight to bring you safely home. May the nourishment of earth be yours. May the clarity of light be yours. May the fluency of the ocean be yours. May the protection of the ancestors be yours. And so may a slow wind work these words of love around you, an invisible cloak to mind your life. So just take a moment to breathe into your nose. If it's helpful, put your feet flat to the floor, or find any position that allows you to stretch your back open, to bring your shoulder blades together just slightly and open your heart and your chest and slightly lift your chin. We are going to stand with who we are in this moment. And this is the ground we stand on, this practice of not turning away from pain and suffering today. So breathe in through the nose and breathe out through the mouth. Just a few breaths is all that's really needed. When we practice this practice of compassion, it is not compassion for others or compassion for self. It is compassion. It means shared suffering. And so when we practice compassion, we share. There is no mine or yours. There is simply what is. This is this. This is ours. I am not living in your world. You are not living in my world. This is our opportunity. Take it or leave it. It's still there. You know, the thing about oneness is it was true before you thought of it, and it's true after you reject it. So when you come up to those things in yourself or those things from another that you want to reject and say they're not one of us, oneness is true whether you can sit with it or not. So in the sitting with it, we release the struggle. And if you're sitting in meditation and you're struggling to find peace, then you're not meditating, you're struggling. And that's okay. You need to recognize that and say, I'm struggling. When you're finding peace and all you feel is war, you're not seeking peace, but that's okay. It's the recognition that I am not at peace that helps us to find our way to peace. It has to be. The moment you use your mind to think about bringing more love into your heart and into your life and into the world, you are already doing that. The only thing you have to do at that point is maintain the mindset. You don't have to change your mind anymore. Once you have made the thought in your mind, I need to be loving today, then the only work is to maintain that. It's much easier than changing your mind. You don't need to change your mind anymore. So when we're moving through our day to day on this height of anxiety in the election day, starting our day off with a few breaths and a belief and a love and a thought towards generating kindness only needs to be maintained. So thanks for being here this morning. I appreciate you all. I love you all. And I wish peace and safety for every single one of us. And I have thoughts that it's unlikely today, but unlikely things happen all the time. The poet Mary Oliver says, keep a little room in your heart for the unimaginable. Challenge accepted.